And to discuss Barry Humphries and his wonderful comic creations, I'm joined by the actor James Dreyfus. Good evening, James. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hello. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good. And you, James, you actually had the honour of working with Barry Humphries. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, that is right. I mean, I can't say I know him and was a friend, but I spent a week in a room with Barry Humphries, Dame Edna Everage, and Les Patterson, and Madge Alsop. So we have 7 full days of watching him create and improvise and talk about his favourite guests, because, of course, the joy of Barry, we all know about his massive intellect and we all know about his artistic talents, but what you don't know, perhaps, is the joy he took in his guests, in interaction.
Yeah, but that's one of the amazing things about him is he was so spontaneously funny. I mean, you put him in an interview situation or with people he didn't know, he could just bring it alive. He just had that at the tip of his tongue. It was amazing skill.
Well, if you let me know when I've got a minute left, I'll end this interview with to read something quickly out from Michael Palin's diary, if I'm allowed.
Yeah,
which will tell you a whole lot about him. But for example, Jeffrey Archer, because you have to enter this world eagerly, don't you? You have to play along, oh Dame Edna. And Jeffrey Archer was a joy to Barry, because he not only did he enter the world, he went way over the top. And actually, he was remarkably fond of Jeffrey Archer because Jeffrey Archer could take the most merciless ribbing. And I think that was the joy. I mean, there's that wonderful quote of him when Jeffrey Archer's telling a story, and it's not a very interesting story, and Dame Edna sat back and goes, "You could work that up into a nice little anecdote, Jeffrey," which kind of said it all.
Just utterly brilliant. I mean, the thing about Dame Edna in particular is that the act was so subversive. Like, going back many, many decades, it's always been a really sort of edgy, comedic act. But he was doing this into his 90s, and he was set to tour again next year. Just astonishing.
Yes, he was. Yes, I mean, it's extraordinary. The trouble is, the great thing about him was that actually it's something that withstood the test of time. It was ageless because of his wit, because of his. I mean, and everyone uses the word genius now, and it's garbage most of the time. I mean, but this was a true garbage. This was a true genius, and woe betide you if you didn't play along and you didn't enter into the spirit of it. If you tried to be funnier than him, you were dead. If you were an interviewer, you could see the fear in Aspel's eyes sometimes. You could see the fear, not so much with Parkinson, because Parkinson knew him very well, but they still had to go a very delicate course, and woe betide the guests that didn't know who he was.
And sometimes, even when Barry Humphries was being interviewed as Barry Humphries, he was really funny. You know, when he made that joke about Philip Schofield coming out, but he was addressing it to the other presenter who wasn't, in fact, Philip Schofield. And people fell for it.
That was the genius of him. I mean, if you didn't know who he was, you'd think, who's that rather senile, distracted man who doesn't understand? But you can see it in his eyes. And those of us who've grown up with him, you know, my parents used to sort of keep him a secret, rather like Father Christmas, because I was never sure that he was actually a man. And then when I slowly realised he was a man, he used to force ex-prime ministers, Edward Heath, to kiss him. You know, twice when you come. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, a man's just kissed a man on television, and it was extraordinarily groundbreaking. I mean, it really was.
And the fact that, you know, he was lauded by, you know, royalty. He could make jokes with royalty in the royal box and that kind of thing. And yet he was, like I say, so subversive. That's a very unusual ability.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking about this last night, I can't think of anyone else on the planet who could have got away with that moment in the royal box. And I mean, credit to Charles and Camilla. I mean, you could tell they had no idea. They might have been told something was going to happen, but he was the only person. And it was 5 words. 5 words, and he brought the house down. Yeah. I mean, that tells you a lot about the talent of Barry Humphries.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, James, I would love you to read this excerpt from Michael Palin. If you would like to, now's your chance.
Can I do it very quickly?
Yes, please do.
It's less a minute. This was during the interval of a show of his, and his manager was overhearing two people talking about the show, and one of the wife said to the thing, one was accusing the other of sighing. I wasn't sighing. Yes, you were. You were sitting there sighing all through it. The producer then went to Barry Humphries in the interval and told him this story, and he couldn't believe his ears when halfway through Edna's monologue to a packed 1,500 strong house, Edna told of how she couldn't take Norm to the theatre because he'd just sit there and sigh, and eventually became very combative. Afterwards, Barry said he'd slipped it in because of his enjoyment of the effect it would have on just two people. As Barry put it, it would make, for them, a truly uncanny night in the theatre.
Just an absolute consummate performer. Brilliant. James Dreyfus, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.